Hey, it's me, the Quenchies. I'm that late afternoon craving you just can't shake. Wait, what's that? Welch's Grape Aid? No! Made with real fruit and no added sugar, nothing answers the call of the Quenchies like Grape Aid. Got the Quenchies? Grab a Grape Aid in your juice aisle.
In this ad for the Mobile One brand, I have 30 seconds to talk about driving, which might be what you're doing right now. Maybe you're in the car, you're free, you're in control, on an open road with an open calendar. Your mind is wandering, and you're going with it. Or maybe you're stuck at work, in meetings, or emails. Or worse, meetings about emails. And if that's the case, there's only one question. Why? Mobile One, for the love of driving. Visit loveofdriving.us/radio to learn more.
I don't think people should just going around and say, you're possessed, you're possessed, you're possessed. I don't. I don't believe that. I think that you have to err towards the caution. But I do look at something like the Catholic Church, and I don't necessarily think they're just making it up. So I think it's something to be extremely, extremely, extremely careful about, because I think there probably have been over the ages. I know there have. Many times people have been, announced to be possessed, and then horrible things happen. And they really have a mental illness.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Bully Hugs and Mental Health, a free, safe space for people to share and learn from others' experiences with mental health and addictions. I am your host, Todd Rennebaum, a suicide attempt survivor and a recovering substance abuser. Well, welcome to another episode. This week, it is the Halloween episode. I speak with the incredible podcaster Jim Harold. He has many podcasts about the paranormal, blah, blah, blah. Very, very scary. And we discuss mental health and the paranormal. Ooh, yes. Yes, very scary. We've been recording some very heavy episodes lately, so I wanted to light things up. Lighten it up with ghosts and goblins and UFOs and things. Blah, blah, blah. See, I'm a vampire. That's what I was doing there. Oh my God. Anyway, we've been recording some and listening to some pretty heavy episodes lately, so I thought it would be fun to talk about the paranormal. And there is a bit of a correlation between the paranormal and mental health, I think. Well, you'll see. Jim's no mental health expert, and he lets us know that right off the bat. But he is he's talked to thousands of people about paranormal things. So I thought, who better than Jim? So anyway, without further ado, I give you Jim Harold.
Well, I'll make it very clear up front. I don't give mental health advice. This is just a lay person's opinion on whatever comes up. Right. Seek out professionals, all that good stuff.
Right. Something I was looking into were people that maybe had like PTSD and trauma from paranormal events. And I really couldn't find anyone, so I thought I'd just reach out to you, who you spoke to, thousands at this point? Thousands. I
don't know of anybody who's ever told me that they've been diagnosed, but I assume if something could be intense enough, I think of these poltergeist cases where it's repeated. I guess I could see that being the case.
Right.
I had somebody last week who said, they encountered, I think this was literally, as we sit here now, last week's campfire, where somebody said they encountered what they claimed to be a 12-foot tall shadow person, and they were thinking about getting into paranormal investigation and getting more out in the field and those kind of things, and that dissuaded them from doing it. That's not really PTSD. It's more of a, just the thought process of like, I don't want to go any further into this. So I really can't think of any cases. Let's put it this way. I can't think of any specific cases that would fit that criteria. But if somebody has had trauma time after time after time again, it only makes sense that probably some of them do have that, but none that I know of specifically.
I can't imagine it. I'm assuming it would be mentally difficult for people that are experiencing paranormal activity to even go and talk to a science person. I
could totally see where it would be difficult for someone with paranormal experiences to be afraid to go talk to a professional because, frankly, I think most psychiatrists, most psychologists, people like that in the mental health arena would assume that the person had some kind of issue going on. And, I never want to discount, that could be a possibility in some cases,
Sure,
obviously.
yeah.
But I also am one of those people who believe these things actually exist and people actually experience them. So it is kind of difficult when somebody says, I see shadow people. If you take that to a clinical psychologist, my guess is the first place their mind is going to go is some kind of hallucination. And again, and I want to make this disclaimer, and I want to make sure this gets on the show. I am not a mental health professional. I don't claim to be a mental health professional. I do not give mental health advice. For my shows, I'm just kind of a friend over the air that people can tell these stories to, which I think, not from a clinical sense, but I think that it is a good thing to be able to share experiences with people who aren't going to say, oh, there's something going on, there's an issue, or I don't believe you, or you're making this up. I think it is good for people to have that outlet. But in no way do I claim in any way that it's any substitute for consulting with a mental health professional, or in any way do I ever try to provide any mental health advice.
Right, yes. And that's, 100%. This is just kind of you and I maybe making assumptions or, just our opinions on what maybe people go through.
A layperson's opinion, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. But I've often thought that I'm sure there's psychological struggles with a lot of these people. One, either, like you said, either maybe they are clinically have a mental illness, or B, they just can't get validation from anyone within science. So in a way, you really do provide a service for people to just feel validated. That must be amazing.
I want to
people.
be non-judgmental to people and kind of meet them where they are. And let me be clear, I can't speak to their overall lives. I can't say this person doesn't have a mental issue because I only see a very slight sliver. But I think that the vast majority of people who call into my show are very sincere. I think that they're simply saying this thing happened to me. And I think in the vast majority of cases, it's not a case where they're making it up or anything like that. And I would go further and say, I don't believe they're hallucinating in most cases or anything like that. I think they are experiencing paranormal things because I believe that they are real. Now, someone might say that I'm the one with an issue, but I believe this stuff is real. And I don't think everybody I talk to, or I don't even think most of the people I talk to are making it up. I think it happens to us, and it happens to tremendous skeptics, and it happens to people who happen to believe in all of this. It happens, it's really universal. I think anybody listening to this right now, if they don't personally have a story, they know someone that they trust would tell them the truth and has relayed a story to them. I think that's 99.9% of the population.
Yeah, I agree. I don't talk about my experiences much because I don't know. I worry what people think, so I can only imagine if, and there was only one or two experiences, but I can't imagine if it was like a reoccurring thing, what people would.
I would even go in the other direction. I think sometimes when people experience something, they have enhanced abilities. And maybe, I always joke that I'm psychic as a board. So, so maybe it's the case that people who experience these things, at least some of them, they actually have a greater awareness of the world than we normies do, supposedly. So, I do believe some people have psychic gifts. I believe that's a real thing.
I often wonder how many people, because you hear like this place is haunted, my friend saw ghosts and stuff, and then, well, maybe only they can see ghosts. Maybe it isn't haunted.
Right. Well, I've heard interesting cases. We had one maybe a month ago about a gentleman who went on a paranormal investigation with some of his friends, and they all experienced phenomena, but it was different. They experienced it differently. So whatever they were seeing was presented to them in a different way. One saw one kind of figure, the other one saw the other kind of figure. And is it they're seeing different things, or are the things being presented to them differently based on the way they intake things, based on their fears? I don't know. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of all things, Monsters, Inc. The idea in the closet would be the thing that scares you the most. So it would be programmed to you. Right. And maybe ghosts and spirits are the same way, not necessarily to scare you or whatever people are seeing, but maybe it's the way you perceive things, or maybe it's being fashioned for you specifically. Just a thought, Again, I am one of those people who I've been doing these podcasts for 19 years, the Campfire for 15. And some people say, oh, you must have all this stuff figured out and you must know what's going on. And the truth is, Todd, that I know less now than when I started. But I do believe I know this. There's a quote I came across just recently in the last few months, and I've really become very fond of it. Not only is the universe stranger than you imagine, the universe is stranger than you can imagine. For example,
I don't think our tiny brains can.
Yeah. Well, here's an example. Let's look at things on the quantum level. And again, I don't claim, just as I don't claim to be a therapist, I don't claim to be a scientist, let alone a quantum scientist. But I was just reading a story. And at the subatomic level, essentially what they discovered, there's this one study that they set up, and I don't know exactly how to explain it. So I'll explain it as if it were at the macro level. And it's the equivalent of they were able to look at particles going into other particles. And it'd be like if you exited a door before you came into the room, but at the subatomic level. We just talked about it on our show, The Paranormal Report. And it's much more specific than that and so forth. And I've got the links over there about that on the Paranormal Report. But the idea that how could you exit a room before you enter it? I mean, and again, this is not at the macro level. It's at the very, very micro subatomic level. I mean, how does that even work? So, I mean, again, I think that our brains are amazing, but I think they're like great radio receivers. But those great radio receivers might not be able to pick up all the frequencies, even though they're very good at picking up some.
Yeah, like you're talking about our brains maybe can't even understand the universe, but we can't even understand time, and that's just a part of the universe. I talk
about this all the time. Yeah, exactly. And that study actually had to do with time, and the idea that time is not linear. And I've heard it postulated that everything that has ever happened is happening right now, but we can only access where we're at. It's kind of like there's that movie, I always get the title wrong, Everything Everywhere All at Once, or whatever it's called. Right. Mm-hmm. So I mean, and I did hear an interesting explanation of that. And it's kind of like, the world is a book, right? This is my most recent book. And, as we're going through it, it seems very linear, right? I'm on page 81 and then I will go to page 82 and so forth and so on. And it's very linear. But all this exists at the same time. But I'm just accessing it one page at a time. So it appears to be linear to me, but it's all this information's here all at the same time. I thought that was an interesting way of maybe describing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've heard it as a loaf of bread too, and you just take slices.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Gonna stack time.
Yeah. Something else I wonder about every time I listen to your podcast is, I think I've heard you mention it before too on the podcast, is sometimes I wonder if people will things to happen. So they just hear a house is haunted and then they see things, and they see it even as a group. But I wonder if there's a way that our minds are able to actually create a physical thing
This is something that I'm very interested in, and this has been looked at, in kind of Eastern spirituality and so forth with the idea of a tulpa. I remember years ago, I interviewed a gentleman. His name is Michael Clarkson, Canadian. I believe he was up at one point for a Pulitzer Prize. Very serious newspaper journalist, very hard-boiled guy, dealt with the police beat and crime. So not trying to get in touch with the oneness of the universe. Very kind of hard-boiled guy. But he did a book on poltergeist. And he came to the conclusion at the end of it that it was real. And probably not the kind of guy you would think going in would say, yeah, there really is something to this. And he felt strongly that, if I remember correctly, and this is over 10 years ago I talked to him, but that this was something that you could create a poltergeist. I mean, here's another example. I believe it was up in Toronto in the 70s. There was an experiment done called the Philip experiment. And there were this group of people that got together. And you can find it. You can Google it and look it up. And they were interested in psychic phenomena. And they decided, and I think they had a weekly meeting or something. And they said, we are going to create a ghost named Philip. And here is his backstory. And sure enough, they created him. Look it up, the Philip experiment. So and this is not to say people are imagining things. They're not imagining them. They could, to your point, be creating them. And I think that's very real, very in a unintentionally maybe, or maybe in the case of the Philip experiment, maybe intentionally. But I think that's definitely something that's possible. And I think that we underestimate the power of the mind. And I would go to something like manifesting. Now, I'm not somebody that's going to sit here and say, okay, I'm going to concentrate and I'm going to get a brand new car in my driveway and it's just going to appear. I don't believe it works like that. I don't. What I do believe is if I work hard towards a goal and I have a positive outlook and I say this is going to work and this is likely to work and I feel very good about it. I think you're much more likely to have a positive outcome than you are if you say, oh, well, I'm going to do it, but there's no way this is going to work.
It's like the secret.
Well, I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Again, I am not one of those, and there are people who believe it. They think, concentrate enough and that new car will just show up some way. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily go that far, but I do believe, to me, it's like a chemical reaction. If you put in hard work, you put in, diligence, and you put in a positive attitude, your chances for a positive outcome are going to be much greater than they're going to be if you're kind of negative. I think it was Henry Ford who said something like, if you think you can do something or you can't do something, you're right.
Yeah, that's a good quote. We were talking about mental illness and paranormal, and brings me back to a buddy of mine, Andrew Gold. He has a podcast.
Oh, I've spoken to Andrew before.
Yes. Yeah, I heard you on there. And he did a whole thing about, what's it called when you get possessed and...
Possession.
Exorcism.
Exorcism, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he did a whole documentary about exorcisms in Central America or South America. And, it was in his conclusion that these people were just mentally ill. They had, either psychosis or schizophrenia or whatever. And that these rituals were just a big pot of poo-poo. But also there's a thing called like the placebo, and that too can actually help people, right? So, right. I find that fascinating that our minds, we can actually trick our minds into healing in a way, if that makes any sense.
I could see that. I mean, let's put it this way, and this is an area where I try to be super, super careful.
I know you do.
Because I want to be clear, I would hate for people who are victims of mental illness to be mischaracterized.
Exactly, yes.
With being possessed. I think that would be horrible.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, is that to say that no possessions ever exist? I don't know if I would go that far. You look at the Catholic Church, and they have a very real effort towards exorcism. I think, you have to be super careful. I don't think people should just going around and say, you're possessed, you're possessed, you're possessed. I don't. I don't believe that. I think that you have to err towards the caution. But I do look at something like the Catholic Church, and I don't necessarily think they're just making it up. So I think it's something to be extremely, extremely, extremely careful about, because I think there probably have been over the ages. I know there have. Many times people have been, announced to be possessed, and then horrible things happen, and they really have a mental illness going on.
Mm-hmm.
And, God forbid that happen.
Introducing the timely children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. The visually stunning book is told through the eyes of a boy whose father suffers from depression. He sees his dad get sad, rest, and even go to the hospital, all while comparing his father's depression to a physical ailment. Sometimes Daddy Cries is getting rave reviews from parents and mental health professionals alike. One critic has stated, "This is a timely and important book that will help countless fathers and sons broach the subject of depression." An Amazon customer commented, "An excellent book to open up a conversation with a young child about depression in a parent." Sometimes Daddy Cries is available in hardcover and paperback on Amazon.ca and Amazon.com.
Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadline so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
At Mayo Clinic in Florida, we're detecting the undetectable with AI technology that can spot signals in the human voice that are indicators of heart disease. Learn more at mayoclinic.org/possible. Mayo Clinic, you know where to go.
The other thing, so I think a lot about stuff when I'm listening to your podcast, because you cover, paranormal that's a big umbrella.
Yeah, for me, a lot of people think when you say paranormal, they, you have a show about ghosts. Yeah, and I say, and about 20 other things. Because to me, when I started in 2005, a show called The Paranormal Podcast, which it was so early in podcasting, I got that name. I plugged it. I'm like, somebody's got to have this. And nobody did. So I took it. So, but anyway, the point is, when I made that up, paranormal, to me, that meant all of this stuff, and now it seems to have over time narrowed to people think, I think it's because of the ghost hunting TV shows. They think, the paranormal, it's all, going in dark buildings, running after ghosts. And it's a lot more than that, I think.
Yeah, I do too. Poltergeists, like you said, that could just be energy. And I've heard studies that you get a bunch of teenagers together in that angst.
Yeah,
and that energy.
There's a lot of looking at that. It seems like one of the highest indicators for poltergeist activity are adolescents in the house.
Yeah, that's fascinating. But yeah, we always think about ghosts or these time slips or glitches in the Matrix where people suddenly they're walking through a village that's 200 years ago, and then they turn the corner and everything's back to normal. It's was that a ghost?
Yeah, what's interesting for me is when people tell those stories and they have confirmation from other people, because I think that sometimes a lot of people just jump to the conclusion, they're imagining that.
Yeah.
But when you have multiple, and I know that people will say, mass hallucinations and stuff like that. But at some point, it's kind of like, it's kind of like you can't explain everything away. So it's very interesting for me to see those sorts of things where you have multiple people, and we do have that on the campfire, multiple people saying, I experienced this.
Too, it's like, okay, even if 99% of the people that called in were wrong or made it up, still 1%. That's
right.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I
of
had that
still.
discussion with Dr. Michael Shermer, who I don't know if he still is, but he was the editor of Skeptic magazine. Probably I don't know about now, but at the time, at least the second best known skeptic in the United States, other than the late James Randi. Now, one thing I'll say for Dr. Shermer, perfect gentleman, and he was willing to have the conversation and be civil. We totally disagreed on everything, but he was willing to have the conversation and was very civil. And the thing I said almost exactly what you said. I said, well, Dr. Shermer, maybe we agree, for example, UFO cases. Mm-hmm. We might agree that the vast majority are explicable, but what about the handful that all of the things you just ticked off are part of this that we don't know? And he's like, we know that there is that percentage, but we just put them on the shelf. That's what graduate students are for. And I'm paraphrasing. I'm like, wait a minute. So you're saying a few percent might have something to them, you know it, but you just put them on the shelf. Mm-hmm. And he was, again, real gentleman, great guy, really respected the fact he was able and willing to have a civil conversation. A lot of people in kind of that quadrant of thought kind of say, I'm not going to waste my time with that paranormal podcast guy. But he did, and I appreciate it. I don't know if he wasted his time. Maybe in his eyes he did, but he was very cool. He was very cool. I appreciated that. And over the years, I've tried to have skeptics on as much as possible because I think sometimes, I always think in any field of human endeavor, even if you've got a very, and I believe in this in politics and in every aspect of life, religious, whatever it might be, you've got one perspective. It's good to hear other people's perspective. Now, you may never agree with them. You may go away from that conversation saying, they're even more wrong than I thought they were. But I think it's good to listen to other voices.
Yeah, especially around now because so many things are divisive.
Yes, and I do try to stay away from politics on the show because we talk about,
same.
For example, my favorite topic on the show is that of the afterlife. And it doesn't matter if you are left-wing or right-wing or centrist, Republican, Democrat, Labor, conservative, whatever it is, everybody's going to have to go through that process of physical death. Now, many of us, like me, believe that we live on. But that is a universal experience. And it's not like, well, you're not going to, if you're a Republican or if you're a Democrat, you're not going to go through that process. No, we're all going through that process. So the questions that we talk about on the show, I feel are universal. So I like to leave it open to everybody despite their political beliefs one way or the other.
That makes total sense, yeah. I often wonder, I'm starting every sentence with, I often wonder, but like I said, I wonder a lot if people can manifest their afterlife even. Because
I've heard that.
You grow up believing this is what's going to happen to you when you die in one culture, and then another culture is this, and then maybe, I don't know, maybe that's like a multi-universe thing.
That is not, that is something I would not rule out. I mean, if you have a higher, I personally believe in a higher power. So if you have a higher power and, that higher power decides I'm going to deal with everybody on their own terms in ways that they can understand, maybe that's the answer is, okay, I'm going to present to you Jesus. I'm going to present to you Buddha. Maybe in another situation, in a near-death experience, maybe there's no religious figure at all, just peace or something. So maybe, that's again, with a lot of these theories, one is just as good as the other because none of us know.
Yeah, I want to know, damn it.
Yeah, I think, and that's the thing is like, I remember when I was a kid. I remember when I was a kid, and this is really where the whole journey started for me, was I used to watch In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy.
Yes.
And it was a 30-minute show, so probably 23, 24 minutes with commercials. And at the end, I would always be disappointed because I'm like, these are only possible explanations for the phenomena we observe or something. And I was like, well, why isn't there an answer? Why isn't there an answer? And I find myself, Todd, I'm not 8 years old anymore. And I find myself just like that 8-year-old little Jimmy Harold, and thinking, why isn't there an answer? And I don't think we're, as long as we're on this plane, I don't think we're going to get that answer.
Do you think we'll understand it all when we die?
That I'm hopeful for. I think that's possible.
too.
And it's funny because, and this, as I get older and I do the show longer and longer, and this is kind of sad. It is sad. But more and more of my guests leave this world. And, a lot of times, and I've seen other people say, now hopefully they got the answers to all the questions that they asked. And I do hope that for us. Because, wouldn't that be like the ultimate cliffhanger if you just die and you don't find out?
Right.
It's kind of like, I didn't get my money's worth. I want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you get like 2 answers, but you have like 10. Yeah. It's like, what about the other 8?
You only get 2.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. And I mean, I find it boggling that some people can be so skeptical when, I've experienced things, and then I'm not one of these people that, like, I have a friend that's like, anytime anything happens, it's like, oh, that was a sign from whatever. Right. And it's like, okay, like, settle down, buddy. So I'm skeptical-ish, but I've had some stuff that's so, okay, I'm getting a little emotional even. Like, we lost a family member this summer, and on Saturday night even, there was something like my wife and I both just like instantaneously like shot our heads and like stared at each other like, okay, that was pretty phenomenal that we were, I don't know if I want to get into it because I might get too upset, but something happened on Saturday that was like almost undeniable, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, well, like you say on the podcast all the time, it's too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence.
Well, I'll give you a story that I literally just recorded and it hasn't even been on the air yet. I literally recorded it about 2:00 today, and it'll be on. I don't know when this is airing, but this will be on the campfire for October 10th. So by this time it'll already have been out. But it was a remarkable story, and it's one of those stories where there are 2 possibilities in my mind. One, the person experienced something definitely paranormal, or they're making it up. And I don't believe they're making it up. I think there's certain stories we get, those are the 2 possibilities. So anyway, this was from the UK, and our caller had a dream. And she was in a park, and one of her friends, a male friend, was playing with some kids. His name was Bill. And all of a sudden, this woman comes up to her and says, "I'm Sally. My name is Sally. I'm Sally. My name is Sally." And the woman was like, "What's up with this woman? She's just like so insistent in my face. My name is Sally. I'm Sally." And then she starts looking at the kids and her friend again, in real life, the friend. And the woman comes back up to her. "My name is Sally. I'm Sally. I'm Sally." So anyway, she, how you get a dream and you wake up and like, what in the world was that about? She goes back to sleep. A few days later, she's talking to her friend, Bill. And she said, "Bill, I had the craziest dream the other night and you were in it." And he proceeded to tell her there was this woman and she kept getting in my face. I've never seen her before in my life. She kept saying, "My name is Sally. Sally, my name is Sally." He's like, "You're kidding me. My dead sister's name is Sally." And she's like, "Really?" She's like, "Yeah, here's a picture." It was the same woman. And Bill, I guess at least, I don't know all the details, but in part was taking care of this woman's kids. She died tragically. So I took it this way. If Bill would have had a dream about Sally, Bill would have thought, "Oh, she's on my mind. I'm thinking about her. Of course, I lost my sister. Very tragic. Of course, she's on my mind. Of course, I'm dreaming about her." However, Bill's friend, who never knew Sally, Never met Sally, didn't know Sally existed, never saw a picture of her. She has a very vivid and striking dream where Sally is very insistent that I'm Sally and you need to know I'm Sally. Knows what she looks like, and all of this is verified. What better way to say to Bill from Sally, I'm still here, I'm watching over you and the kids, and I could see you. Now, you tell me, two possibilities. Either, one, the caller's making it up, and I do not believe she was making it up. There's no benefit to her making it up. Seems like a very rational person. Number two, she experienced something that the best term we have for it right now is the paranormal. Now, what it is, maybe in 300 years, we'll be able to explain that scientifically. I don't know. So these things, I believe, happen, and they're not just figments of people's imagination. I guess they can't be sometimes, but the vast majority of the time, I think that they're real, and I think the people who call into the show are being very straight with me. And that's the way I see it. And that story's a good example of it. Okay, yeah, sure.
Coincidence, but I mean,
well, I would say if it were just the name, if it were just the name, I would say yes. But
right, even that would be amazing.
It would be an amazing coincidence. However, to look exactly like her, the picture looks exactly like her. That, as I often say, too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I would knock that out on the basis of the photographic evidence, at least in my mind.
Right. Sure. I can't win the lottery, but I get a dream. You know, what are the coincidences? Yeah.
Right.
Speaking about grief, because I do talk about grief on the podcast, being in a mental health topic, I imagine that must have been very heartwarming and comforting for him.
Oh, that's
one of my experiences. Well, actually, I had called into your show and talked to you about it. Was about my grandfather, and it wasn't even me. It wasn't like, oh, that must be Grandpa. I wasn't assuming. My wife actually brought in a medium, and there was stuff that there was no way this. Again, if it was a coincidence, wow, pointing at stuff in the room and knowing who owned it and knowing names and all this stuff. And anyway, yeah, it kind of eases the grief a bit knowing that. I
think so. I really do. I mean, my wife had an experience when my mother-in-law died, and she found it to be comforting. I mean, it was very sad. Her mom died, of course, but she had an experience, a vision that she saw that was comforting to her. And I think getting these contacts from loved ones, I mean, I look at it two different ways. First of all, I believe that they can be and very many times are real. I do believe that. And again, I am not a psychologist. I don't pretend to be one. But to me, if somebody thinks they've gotten a message, maybe they haven't, but it makes them feel better and feel better about moving forward with their life in a constructive way, what's the harm in that?
Exactly.
I mean, but I do believe there are many legitimate cases of people getting a message from the other side. I believe, I'll give you one that I've talked about on the show, and it's one of those things, honestly, that a lot of people will say is a coincidence, but it's one hell of a coincidence. So in 2013, I lost my one uncle who was like a second dad to me. I mean, honestly, he was just literally like my second dad. I mean, my dad is 88 and still with us, knock on wood, soon to be 89. But it really devastated me when I lost my uncle. So, and he and my dad were extremely close. So, I was going to say they were like brothers, but I guess that goes without saying.
Exactly like brothers.
So exactly like brothers, but to the nth degree, they lived together for most of their lives, other than when they were in the service. But anyway, so I had the opportunity to go on a cruise that was kind of like a paranormal cruise, and there were a few people there, including the late, great Rosemary Ellen Guiley. I think this was 2017, if I remember correctly.
She's passed now, too?
Yeah, she was fantastic. One of the best. Highly recommend her books. Anyhow, and a great person too. And I still miss her. She was my most popular guest in terms of times on the show. She was on, I counted up 20 times.
Wow.
Yeah, I should have actually just done a podcast with her. It would have been probably smarter. She was on so much, but she was excellent. I'd love to have her on again. And she was so great. But anyway.
You watch. Today she'll reach out to you somehow.
Well, that would be cool. I would like that very much. But anyway, so she was there and some other people. And we had this day at sea where we were all going to give a little talk. So the time was coming around where my talk was coming up. Unfortunately, I had a little bit of a cold. So they had the little conference room. It was right next to the casino, right, of the thing. And then you had to go through the casino to get to the cafe to get coffee. So I went to go, and I was stopped dead in my tracks because one of the members, attendees of our group, the people that pay to go and schmooze with the speakers and so forth, he was playing this crane game, where the claw comes down and picks up stuffed toys and stuff, but this was for money. Well, the thing is that was a thing that we joked about in our family because my uncle loved the crane games. He would go into any kind of a store or something, and he would immediately, when he got ready to leave, he had to play the crane game. He would drop $10, wouldn't even think about it, to get a stuffed toy he didn't even want. And then if some kid or something would come around the house and be like, here, have a toy. But he just liked to play the game. In fact, he liked it so much that one year we got him a little toy one.
Oh.
That's how much he was known for this. So anyway, it just immediately, anytime I think of one of those, I immediately think of my uncle. So this guy's playing it, and this one had money, and I'm like, oh, this would be great. My uncle would love this. Not only because he also liked to do small-time gambling. Nothing big. He liked to play the lotto. He liked to bet the football pool, modest amounts. Nothing big. Nothing like, people on your phones now, I'm going to bet $1,000 parlay. Nothing like that. But like, $20 here, $10 here, that kind of thing. So I'm like, he would love this because not only would he be able to play the crane game, he'd be doing it for money. So just that minute, a woman walks up next to the machine and she cups her hand to her mouth and she goes, John. Guess what the name of my uncle is? John.
Please tell me you talked to that lady.
I did not.
Oh.
Her husband or whoever it was came up to her and they went.
I see.
Well, they went off. Now, here's the thing. Some people would say that's a coincidence. I would say that's one hell of a coincidence, seeing all the thousands and thousands of other names it could have been. The timing had to be just right. Maybe that guy had to be playing the thing or I wouldn't have even noticed it because I was in a hurry. She had to get separated from her husband. His name had to be John. I had to be thinking about it. All the permutations that had to happen. I do think somehow on the other side, whether it's through themselves or maybe there's intercessors or something, that maybe those sometimes the people on the other side have this power to give us signs and make everything line up like chess pieces. And that day, everything lined up. And I think basically the take-home message was, you're thinking of me. I'm thinking of you. I care for you. You care for me. I care for you. I love you. And I'm still out there somewhere playing the crane game.
Yeah. And that probably filled your heart that day.
But again, that was and again, it had been 4 years. But, anybody who loses somebody exceptionally close to them, it's basically something you carry with you the rest of your life. I think I heard Billy Bob Thornton say his brother died and he's never been the same again. And you never are the same again. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't. I mean, some people, unfortunately, it means it. But I mean, for me, I go on and I function and I live my life and I have happy times. But like most people who have lost loved ones, and I think once you reach a certain age, that's everybody. I lost my mom right around the same time my uncle passed, and still, the other day I'm walking and I'm like, 11 years my mom's been gone. 11 years. I can't believe it. 11 years. It sticks with you. But I think the best you can hope for is to remember, obviously, the good times. Remember what they meant to you, what you meant to them. And for those of us who have that belief, that we carry on with the hope that someday, somehow, the full script hasn't been written and there's some kind of reunion or acknowledgement or something. And I think when you get those signs, they can be very powerful and they can be very helpful. Because in my case, I'll use my case because I can talk about myself and I'm not projecting onto somebody else or giving somebody else advice. Mm-hmm. If it's true that was my uncle, boy, isn't that cool. Mm-hmm. If it's true that it's just a coincidence, isn't that cool? Because that made me feel so much better and continues to make me feel that much better. And I have this little thing with my uncle. My uncle had a lot of tools. And when he passed, I basically got all his tools. So, I'm not always the best with organization. So I'll be looking for a socket or a particular screwdriver and I'll go, "Hey, John, help me out here. Let me find the right socket." And again, it might just be coincidence, but it seems like when I do that, within 30 seconds, I find it. Sometimes not, but most of the time, yes.
Even, people describe that as, is that paranormal then? I guess so, because it's unexplained.
I think so. I think that we have taken the power of the world paranormal out. We've limited it and we kind of put it in that, like I said before, in that box of, that's when men and women put on black T-shirts and run around buildings with meters and act scared. Exactly. That's all it is. And it's like, no, it's all this mysterious stuff we don't understand.
Yeah, even like religious experiences and angels and things like very not scary stuff.
Well, yeah, exactly. My show is, you listen, they're not all scary stories. There are plenty of scary stories, but there's very reassuring stories. And to me, people will say, well, what has it done for you? Has it made you more frightened? Has it scared? It actually has reassured me because I have always been, now I'm somebody, and some people don't subscribe to this, and I respect that, but I believe there is good and I believe there is evil. And I always believe that. So now when I hear somebody confront something that's frightening or even potentially evil, although I think the whole demon thing is overblown, but I do think bad things exist, it doesn't frighten me because I always felt they existed anyway. It more for me is when I hear the good stories, it's like, yeah, that's more affirmation. The good stuff exists. So if anything, it has made me feel better, if that makes any sense. And I've had people who call in say, I'm going through stuff and things have happened and I listen to the campfire and I feel better. And if, again, it's not therapeutic. It's not a replacement for therapy. It's not a replacement for seeking a professional. I'm not saying it is. But if it helps people make people feel better, that makes me feel better.
Thank you so much, Jim. I'm not going to lie, you guys. I love paranormal stuff, and I love Jim's podcasts. I think his two biggest ones are Jim Harold's Campfire, where people call in and tell their stories about paranormal, and the Paranormal Podcast, where he talks to experts about all types of things paranormal. As we discussed, it's not just ghosts. So yeah, go check out those podcasts. He's also got a few others. He's also got Jim Harold's Crime Scenes. That's a true crime one. Go Google him. Go check him out. Go on Apple Podcasts and YouTube and just look up Jim Harold. I will also put some links in the show notes for all his stuff. And if you like his shows, if you like this show, if you like any podcast show, please rate and review them. It is so incredibly important for podcasters to get those ratings and reviews. It's like currency. What's even more like currency is currency. And there is, in the show notes, a link to my brand new website. And on there, you can find all types of things, including buy me a coffee. And I seriously, I've been struggling a bit, and I've been contemplating moving on from the podcast because financially it is not, I don't know what I'm doing financially. But anyway, if you want to help me out financially, you can buy me a coffee. Like I said, it's on the website. Yeah, there's other stuff on the website, from my kids' book to a little reel about my public speaking and things, and yeah, all types of stuff. So go check out bunnyhugspodcast.com. That's bunnyhugspodcast.com. And everything about me is on there. So thank you for listening to this episode. I know it's wildly different than all the other episodes, but it was fun. It was fun. Well, next week it'll be back to normal programming. So until then, I say, please remember to make your beds and take your meds. Bye. Blah, blah.